Welcome back and thanks for staying with the SABC News channel. So the social relief of distress grant has been extended by another year despite government's appeal regarding a court ruling on the eligibility criteria and the long-term status of this grant. An allocation of about 35 billion rand has been set aside to maintain this monthly grant, which was first introduced, you might remember, nearly 5 years ago at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. Let's make sense of the budget with this particular information top of mind and bring in Rachel Bukasa. She's the Executive Director of the Black Sash and is with us now via our video link. Rachel, great to have you on the SABC. Thanks as always for making time. So on the one hand, yes, there was a VAT increase, but on the other, this particular grant has been extended and we're told that the other social relief programs will be increased in line with inflation. The first question then becomes, do you think this is enough to cushion those who rely on social protection from the effects of something like VAT? Oh, Rachel.
Unfortunately, what we see is the minister.
I beg your pardon. Please go ahead.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I was going to say, while we welcome the increase of some of the grants in line with inflation, I think what is important to know around the SRD grant is that the value is still at 370 Rand. So I absolutely agree. It was initially to be a temporary measure at that amount. What needs to happen now, and we've been saying to the minister, is that we need to ensure that social protection mechanisms are strengthened. And how do we do that? Is by turning the SRD into a long-term basic income support grant at a value which is at least at the food poverty line, because right now you're giving someone 370 Rand for the sake of saying you've given it to them and ticking the box, but it doesn't actually make real meaningful change on the ground, especially now with this VAT increase.
There has been, a whole lot of debate, in fact, litigation around whether or not the barriers to even qualifying for this SRD grant are fair. And I wonder how concerned you are about the extent to which this has been addressed in this budget.
So we fully supported the Institute of Economic Justice in their litigation. We thought it was the right move because the way the SRD grant is dispersed at the moment, it's designed to deliberately keep people out. And so what we didn't see in the budget was sort of concerted efforts to be doing that, to making sure that we know government is going to appeal the judgment, but what we didn't see was an effort to make sure that these barriers to entry are reduced. And so that remains a concern. Or it could have been a deliberate, they left it out deliberately because there's an ongoing court case. So perhaps it was that. But the second thing we also didn't see was concerted mitigating factors for the poor with this VAT increase as well. And so what we saw was sort of just giving on the one hand, take this with increase, and then essentially the taking on the other hand by the VAT increase.
For the first time in the country's democracy, we're actually going to see parliamentarians debate this budget. In other words, it's not a foregone conclusion that it may in fact be implemented. Given the commentary that has already been made from the, politicians, so to speak, are you confident that this particular aspect of the budget will remain unscathed? I mean, a lot of the time we've spoken about VAT and its impact specifically on the poor, but getting into that particular process, how worried are you that the poor in fact may get out of this worse off?
The longer this process takes on, so when we don't have a budget, the poor are struggling because the budget allocates to people how much you get for your healthcare, for your education, etc. It's really key. So the longer political grandstandings and political ideologies differ on this, that's where the poor people suffer. But I think what's important, I have actually quite some hope now, because for the longest time we've seen the ruling party at the time consistently just vote the budget in and never have to check in with anyone meaningfully. For the first time, what we're seeing with the coalition government is that, well, actually, you can't just pass this through. There are other considerations you need to take into account. And I think from the commentaries I've seen across board, there's a cross-board criticism of the Minister of Finance for his failure to take other people's feedback in terms of how we do this, how we get him the revenue he's looking for without penalizing the poor. And I think despite him not listening, I think this voting process in Parliament is really going to force that process to them. And so I'm really hopeful and just would like to remind politicians in this process that it's people on the ground that are waiting for this. And so let's have a people first approach as we deal with these things.
Yeah, and many of those people who are reliant on these grants, I think, would prefer jobs instead, Rachel. As the Black Sash, I'm sure this is a sentiment you have heard multiple times. And again, to what extent do you feel this budget addressed specifically that issue around job creation?
I think it's a lot of talk. My job, we work on the ground, so I can only tell you what we see. We're telling you that if you and I went to dinner, it wouldn't be 370 rand. I'm telling you now already. Even lunch, it wouldn't be 370 rand. So people want jobs. And so I think there's this misinformation, or at least this deliberate lack of understanding when it comes to the fiscus and the budget, is that, people just want free money. Nobody wants free money. People would take a salary before they would take a grant. And research has shown over and over again, stronger social protection mechanisms means more people are in the workforce. And so essentially, in terms of the question around job creation, I think we heard a lot of talk. I'm not sure it will come to fruition because it's been 30 years. We're waiting. We are not growing the economy at the speed at which it needs to be grown. We're not absorbing young people in job markets in the speed that they need to be absorbed in. And so I haven't seen anything that the minister has committed to doing differently this time. So this year, he went after the SRD grant. Next year, he's going to go after something else to save his budget. And so I think what we actually need is a concerted effort to grow this economy. People want to work. People want to earn salaries.
Absolutely. Given how long it's taking to get around to some things, Rachel, I have to ask you how realistically confident you are in the prospects of a basic income grant ever seeing the light of day. We've had the discussion for years, and last I checked in that budget, there's not even, any kind of mention of even working towards something like that yet.
It's simply a matter of time, simply because the country cannot afford not to have a basic income support grant. So what essentially they're doing now is extending the SRD, extending it. But the reality around is that they can't do away with the SRD. It would be a retrograde measure where essentially these people worse off than they were. Logic dictates that the next logical step is the basic income support grant. But of course, government works at their own pace. So I am very confident that we're going towards a basic income support grant because it leaves a huge chunk of people out if we don't. You've got 18 to 59-year-olds who have no social protection mechanisms. And if you're serious as a country about making sure that we have a strong, thriving economy, we have to have a safety net for our 18 to 59-year-olds. We have to have social protection mechanisms there. It will take government some time to get to it, but I promise you, logic dictates that that's the next step.
All right, we'll have to wait and see how it all unfolds. Rachel, thanks very much indeed, as always, for speaking to us. Rachel Bukasa is the Executive Director with the Black Sash.